if you are a local entrepreneur competing with a global entrepreneur, your competitive advantage is not ability to raise large sums of capital. Your competitive advantage is to be nimble, is to be creative in how you compete, right? For example, Uber will raise $1 billion or whatever dollars, right? To do the same thing you're doing, right? But you have to think of ways you could lower that. Yeah, so just to probably explain, to users, if you are raising early stage capital, in most cases, companies raise what we call equity. Equity financing is basically you give a portion of your shareholding to the investor, right? Maybe 10%, 20%, whatever amount you agree to. You'd find in most cases, these investors, what happens is most of these funds, they already expect 90% to fail. Storytelling has value. As they say, people forget facts, but they remember stories. So it's important for you as an entrepreneur to package yourself, share your story in whatever form. You don't have to do video. It could be audio. It could be written. It could be long form, short form, blogs. It could be customer testimonials. It could be anything that helps you connect with your audience and build a community from there. Because at that point, your community is one that will stick with you when the business cycle goes down, right? Because right now we have to think of, don't think of Kenya as your market. Think of the world as your market, right? Because someone in China is already building a product for Kenya. Someone in Australia, wherever, they're already thinking of coming. So if you are thinking of just you'll be safe, there's a lot of disruption that will come in.
Today we have a special episode because we have invited an industry professional. I know most of the time we tend to invite end users, the actual consumers of the things we preach, like the taxi drivers, boda riders. But today we have a strategist, a startup evangelist. That's how he calls himself, and he will give us more details. And he is visiting this channel so that he can share inside information on how businesses work, on how startups work, on how to raise capital and make sure that you succeed as a business initiative. A lot of taxi drivers that we speak with have told us that they would want to start their own taxi company and maybe grow it from the ground up and maybe replace the multinationals that have dominated the market. Those are some of the ideas we are going to discuss here. So join the conversation through the comment section. If you have questions, I will link you to my guest for today, and he'll be able to advise you further. So without further much delays, I will invite my guest to introduce himself. Daniel, good morning.
Good morning, Asante, Joseph, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, thank you very much for showing up. I know you are a very busy man in today's world of technology and businesses. But maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and why you think, appearing on this channel is a good thing for our viewers.
Yeah, thanks. I think my name is Daniel Kitwa. I'll just start with that. I'm a professional in the, I would say, clean energy climate space, particularly in investments. By background, I was a trained electronics and computer engineer, and later on, specialized in finance. I've worked across, I would say, the African landscape, East, West, Southern Africa, with companies, global companies with over what I would call $1 billion in assets, which means basically amount of capital you manage. So this could be debt, could be grants, could be equity, or other forms of investments. So both supporting African entrepreneurs as well as foreign entrepreneurs investing into the continent. So that's my background. But above all, I'm a Kenyan and quite passionate about the African landscape. And that's why I talk about it also on my platforms, talking to entrepreneurs and leaders, because I think we're in I would call it the fourth industrial revolution. There's a shift happening in terms of how people consume content and learn. And that's why I try to tailor also, very complex topics into very simple, palatable, ways that can be consumed by the mass market on digital means. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You said that you speak a lot of discussions on entrepreneurship, and maybe you could tell us who is an entrepreneur, and what would one do to say that I'm actually an entrepreneur, and if you are not an entrepreneur, what can you be?
Yeah. So basically, I would define an entrepreneur as someone who's solving a pain point in society, a specific pain point that people are willing to pay for that problem to be solved. So, for example, if you, let's say you have a restaurant, and people keep coming to you to buy your food, it means you're solving probably, hunger, or a certain taste or desire, or certain cuisine they want, maybe what you're providing. So you're a problem solver in that regard. And then also you could be an entrepreneur who is solving multiple problems within the specific niche you are in, right? So it doesn't mean it's a single dimensional problem. So if I add that layer of the restaurant, you could be providing meals, but also probably you're providing ambience, right? Maybe for people to have meetings. So you'd realize there's some restaurants that are ideal for, when you want to have a meeting or conversation, a date, and some are just, convenient just for you to have a meal, right? So for that entrepreneur who is solving multiple layers of problems, they have a much more sticky solution. And then they also have a much more endearing solution to the market, right? Because you could attract multiple types of users and customers. So I'd say, in just simple language, an entrepreneur is a problem solver.
Good.
Yeah.
And I have followed you on social media, on YouTube, on TikTok, and you call yourself the startup evangelist. And, startup means, entrepreneurship and being business oriented. So what type of solutions do you give to startups, to business minded oriented people, so that they can, succeed in those ventures? Because we speak with a lot of people who have entrepreneurship ambitions in different sectors, but generally, your intervention would offer what kind of support to those type of people who would be watching us?
Yeah, so I would say for me, I'm more of a knowledge builder, right? So I realize that everything that was made in this world, so if you look at the cup we have, the phones we have, it all started with an idea. So the concept of the startup evangelist is basically fine-tuning the ideas we come up with, right? So we live in a continent where for the large amount of our history, we've been consumers. So we've been consumers of either imported products or ideas from elsewhere. So the idea is to help people curate ideas that are long lasting. So you'd find sometimes you'd have people start businesses. A lot of businesses in Africa don't outlast even the generation of the founder. They don't go to the third or fourth generation. But if you go to places like Germany, you have 300-year-old SMEs. Right, and if you look at, for example, the context of Kenya, the bulk of our economy is SMEs, right? So I try to help entrepreneurs and founders and leaders think about the solutions they are providing, how sustainable are they in terms of being proof, we would say bulletproof, or being protected from either competition or just being ability to just continue serving their consumers, right? So that's what I do. That's on the strategy, idea kind of space, and I serve in a number of boards, in a number of startup committees, and a number of network organizations supporting startups. And then on the capital side, I've been an active angel investor as an individual, putting my own capital into businesses, but also working with other early stage investors, either angel groups, or early stage venture capitalists or other forms of capital providers to support ideas that we think could be, could take society to the next level. So I'd say broadly those are the, 2 or 3 buckets of how I think I could support. And then of late now trying to structure those ideas into content, because I think you can have one-on-one conversations. Those take time, right? But if I could share the same, you could reach, hundreds, if not thousands of people with the same message that could sort of help them. Yeah. So that's basically what I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are saying that if I have an idea, I can come to you to ask for money, or how how does the idea of investment happen? Because I think all this conversation, we started it on the backdrop of taxi drivers. They came to me saying that they feel like they need their own taxi company, taxi app in Kenya. And they were saying the idea is mature. The sign up by taxi drivers has happened already. Over 1,000 taxi drivers have signed. But they are saying all that they need now is money. They were telling me, Joseph, you give us money.
Yeah.
We develop the app. The drivers start using it the next day.
Yeah.
So maybe you could address that idea of money lacking and people having ideas. Because I think even when growing up, we have always said, if I had money, I would do this. Yeah.
So I think let's decouple the idea of money to start a business or to start any venture, right? Probably there are, maybe 10 years ago, you actually needed, large swaths of money to start a business. Like, for example, let's use your idea of the taxi drivers, right? The taxi drivers, number one, this is what we call a marketplace play. A marketplace play is where you set up a business that connects the buyer and the seller, right? In this case, the good thing is the taxi drivers themselves, they have their own vehicles. So you've already sorted one part of the equation. Remember Uber and Bolt, when they raised the app, they needed to convince both the drivers to sign up and the users to sign up. Right? So this is, I would say, a double-sided marketplace because it will not work without those two, right? But for the taxi drivers, they say now they have the drivers. You say there are 1,000, right?
Yes.
So it means, compared to Uber, the cost of acquiring drivers has been sorted, right? They already have, through their own, WhatsApp groups, networks, and communities, right? So now the question becomes how to sign up, the consumers. So I would imagine for every maybe 4 online trips, there's one offline trip they make, right?
Yes.
So probably they have their trusted user base. So for example, all these are 1,000 drivers. If they make 4 trips a day, those are 4,000 trips. If they make 1 trip offline, that's 1,000 trips. So if they manage to convince, a third of those 1,000 trips, right, to sign up. So you create a waiting list. Every offline consumers, signs up and says, I'm willing to to break the middleman, right? In this case, the middleman is Uber, right? You already have lowered your cost of acquisition, and then you tell all your customers they could also refer. So you create a referral link, right? You could onboard other users in your network through a trust-based mechanism. So that already reduces your cost base because you have to think about it. If you are a local entrepreneur competing with a global entrepreneur, your competitive advantage is not ability to raise large sums of capital. Your competitive advantage is to be nimble, is to be creative in how you compete, right? For example, Uber will raise $1 billion or whatever dollars, right? To do the same thing you're doing, right? But you have to think of ways you could lower that. The second thing I would say, right now there are so many, like if it's building an app right now, there are so many AI platforms that could actually self-generate half of the code you need. So you probably need half of the work to be done with you with AI, and have a few 1 or 2 software guys young Kenyans who can help you, go to now build the last mile, right? The last leg of that solution. And then you're already in pilot mode with your 300 customers and your 1,000 drivers. And you can you can set up the platform in a way that maybe within 2 to 3 months, sort of the data that is generated on that platform reinforces itself in terms of optimizing the route quality, optimizing location of users, and reviews and all those social incentives that are baked in, and even pricing, right?
Yes.
So I've already told you, like with that, you've sort of probably lowered the amount of capital you need by 90%. That's why I say everything with a startup or a business begins with the idea. So if your idea is premised on you need a million shillings or $1 million to start this idea, you will not be able to start. So ask yourself, what would be the intended results? Break it down very scientifically, as I've said. You have two user bases. You have the drivers, you have the users, right? And then what you need is a platform, right? And then of course the underlying things around those platforms is maybe regulation, there's licensing, there's all that. So you need to figure out what that means and what that informs. Then the other thing I would ask is for drivers and taxi operators, of course, the challenge has always been, how do we drive that network effect to our platform, right? So if you investigate very clearly, in most African cities, the big multinational taxi apps, they go to what we call tier 1 cities. Tier 1 cities are the Nairobis, the Kampalas, the Dar es Salams, right? And to some extent, what I would call type 2A cities. Type 2A cities are, the Mombasas and probably Kisumus, right? What will happen if you look at our country, there's a lot more opportunities also emerging in what we call tier 2 cities. That's where the network is not as dense, right? So you could, for instance, consider locking in one of those tier 2 cities to create that pull effect, and starting from there, you could build on that and start coming to the tier 1 cities, because I think that's the edge that you'd have in most of these markets where the multinationals are yet to reach. Right? Yeah.
Wow. And there have been a lot of amounts of money raised towards businesses.
Yeah.
And we have seen such businesses, especially tech startups, raise a lot of money and then within a very short time disappear. Especially tech startups related to logistics and last mile deliveries. I don't want to mention them, but in Kenya, quite a number of them have been known.
Yeah.
They were actually started by big entrepreneurs who are related to big corporates in Kenya. Raised a lot of millions of money, but later disappeared. What is this trend of investors having a lot of confidence in tech startups, like the one we have just discussed about, and then when it comes to the actual implementation on the ground, then it doesn't survive the long term?
Yeah. So just to probably explain, to users, if you are raising early stage capital, in most cases, companies raise what we call equity. Equity financing is basically you give a portion of your shareholding to the investor, right? Maybe 10%, 20%, whatever amount you agree to. You'd find in most cases, these investors, what happens is most of these funds, they already expect 90% to fail.
Okay.
Yes. So you'd find, a lot of the VCs would put, maybe in 100 companies. And
who is a VC?
A venture capitalist. So basically, this is now the investors, the equity investors.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So they would put money in these companies, but the way the business model works in these companies is one company can actually outperform the whole portfolio. Right? So if you look at Uber, there was a time, I think there was a fund that invested, and I think they returned over 10,000 times, the value of Uber, right? Compared to what they had done. So what happens is, if you find an outlier, or what you call a unicorn is a company that will grow to $1 billion in value, they would be able to compensate for all the losses, right? So that's basically from the investor's side, right? But now looking at the entrepreneur side, of course, it's painful from your as individual end to have, because you are not diversified. You have invested all your resources plus the investors in one pot, right? So if you are not like looking it from the investor side, they can afford losing 9 and succeeding in 1. So from the way some of the, I would say, do I call it perspectives or learnings or reasons why some of the companies have fallen, you'd find in most cases they probably did not understand the problem well from the market, right? So for example, you're solving either for a solution that the customers are not ready, or they are solving for problems that are not sticky, right? So that when there's, for example, the economy is not doing well, people stop using your product, right? So for example, right now we have restaurants. There are restaurants from January to December, they will always be packed, right? Because come hay or high water, people have to eat, right? So that's a sticky product. Of course, it depends now on the quality, the price, the location of that restaurant, etc. But that means those startups sometimes were not, their products were not sticky. So after they use, the first wave of launch, where you have excitement, when you want to know you have a product is if you have what you call repeat customers. So what happens is investors will always ask you for a term called MRR. MRR is your monthly recurring revenue.
Okay.
Right. So for example, if and now that's monthly recurring revenue, the amount of Kenya shillings that keeps recurring in your bank account as a business. And then I could also ask you, what is the average revenue per user, right? So if you are a growing business, your users in terms of usage should increase in terms of the amount of money they are spending in your company into your products, and possibly the number of users, right? So you'd find in most cases such businesses were growing, then they stagnated at some point, but their costs are increasing. They are hiring more people, more marketing, more advertising, but it's not translating to that growth. So you'd find at some point you have an unsustainable business where your costs outweigh your income. So that's one issue. I think the other challenge with some of the companies is they were relying on a model that required more and more fundraising. So you require, for you to grow to the next level, you need to raise more funding, right? Rather than either having recurring revenues that are enough to allow you to bootstrap or to reinvest into your business. So that was the challenge I saw. In some cases, there were some companies that were very good, but in my perspective, they went into so many markets at once. So, for example, there were some I know that were in Kenya, they were doing well. Either because of the pressure from the investors, they went to other 3-4 countries, right? And you'd find they are using the profits from Kenya to finance the other 4 countries. So eventually, you get to a point where even the other countries become, they suck up the value that is in Kenya. They cannot reinvest in Kenya, which is succeeding. So I would say in some cases, decisions, either some decisions by the founders in terms of where to focus on growth and target segments are the ones that made these companies not do well. So I would say those are there are major reasons, but of course there are others. You can't ignore regulations, you can't ignore competition. But I would say for the vast majority, of business failure, you know, most of the reasons first become internal before they are external. Yeah.
Good. Very, very nice explanation. And I believe that our viewers are watching and learning something new. I know this is a new type of conversation we are bringing on board.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, our focus here is growth beyond the end users. We want even our viewers to be entrepreneurs and to know what it takes to build a company from the ground up until you succeed and, you know, you sustain the company for many years. So Daniel, I know you have been very, very active in the clean energy sector as well as the technology sector. And you being an investor, I know you already have some insights into the opportunities that people can invest in and where the market is headed in the coming many years. Probably could you give us maybe a short brief of where we have come from in terms of the climate technology in the clean sector, in the clean energy sector, and the opportunities for investors right now and you are focused into the future?
Yeah, good. Yeah, so I think we are privileged as a society, and probably Kenya. We are in a much more unique place because we've been beneficiaries of renewable energy, right? And it has created jobs. Before, if you look at the 90s, if you are an electrical engineer, you'd probably be thinking of applying only to KPLC, the national utility, for an engineering job. Fast forward now, you could apply to a mini grid company, a paygo company, an e-mobility company, a clean cooking company. There are so many clean energy solutions that even people from a technical background can consider venturing into, as opposed to just the utilities the government owns, right? So I think there was a study that was done that for every one employee, Kenya Power employees, 10 are employed by other renewable energy. So there's a 10-to-1 job ratio, right? So I think that's the evolution as fast, the opportunities around jobs. But this hasn't happened in an idle space. There has been trends around technology, right? So right now the cost of solar, what we call per kilowatt or per unit, has gone down by over 90% over the last 20-30 years, right? So that cost has allowed a situation where you can invest even on a very small rooftop project, a very small panel, and it can serve your user needs, right? So that has opened up opportunities for smaller players, small distributors, small engineering procurement companies, and small operators to actually serve smaller customers. Before, you could only benefit from, if you're a big factory or a big industry, right? But now there's opportunities in that regard because of either the unit costs going down and the ability to build what we call modular systems, systems that you can build small and keep increasing as your demands increase. So that's one. I think the other trend that has happened is the world has become a global village, right? So now you can be in Kenya and source capital in China, US, UK. There are companies that are here that have raised all over the world, right? So because of that opening up of the capital markets, you don't really rely on either local banks or local institutions. So there's also a lot of capital that has come in to support both foreign and also local entrepreneurs. So I think those are the trends. You've asked me in terms of where I see this going. There are so many opportunities I think that will emerge. Let's look at, say, battery, right? Last 3-4 years, battery storage costs, I think, have gone by more than 40%. So there's a lot more opportunities for storage, right? Either for households, for consumers, and for businesses. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for battery systems. There'll be an opportunity for e-mobility, again also driven by the cost of batteries, right? Because battery costs were significantly high. So when batteries keep going down, the e-mobility or the electric vehicles will start competing favorably with the petrol and diesel versions, right? So what happens is that will improve probably the economics, in terms of the upfront costs. Of course, we know EV is already competing in terms of on the fuel or long-term maintenance. So
cost of ownership.
Cost of ownership is the challenge, right? In terms of upfront. So those are the trends I'm seeing. The other trend that I'm observing is now the other things that you could add onto clean energy, right? So there'll be a lot of opportunity for data, right? For data management, smart metering, analysis. There'll be a lot of opportunity on logistics, tourism. We are seeing a lot of opportunities on ecotourism. I think even the electric boat industry is also going to grow, right? Because we are still talking of two-wheelers and four-wheelers, right? Just on the land, right? But also at the lake and anywhere there's a water body, those are opportunities that will be growing. I think there are a few companies that have started and they had a few challenges, but I think those are opportunities that will emerge. And of course, the other, it doesn't mean you have to be an engineer or a technician for you to benefit. You could be in finance, you could be in sales, you could be in marketing, because those are, as a sector grows, all the other business skills will be required to support those companies. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing those insights into the opportunities. I know they look like new to our viewers, but the reality is that it's happening already. We have seen a lot of companies that are in the off-grid sectors expanding their operations in Africa. And also we have seen a lot of development institutions like the World Bank support the expansion of the renewable energy access. So thank you very much for that. Now, as we get to the last section of this interview, I would like you to tell us more about the startup Evangelist. I told people that, we know that evangelists are in church, but now here we have a startup evangelist.
Yeah.
Not a church evangelist.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us more about the stories you share, and where people probably can find you, and what they should expect on your platforms.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity again. I think, basically the Startup Evangelist is an ideas platform. So we are on YouTube, on Spotify and TikTok, same names. We've launched our website recently, and we'll be providing a lot of self-training courses on fundraising, on strategy, on access to capital, tech, ideas, all that, right? So and a lot of things that probably would be very costly to, if you were to go to a PwC, a McKinsey, or a big consulting firm, would provide them at a very affordable price range and opportunities for even small businesses. I think over the last couple of months, we've just done, we are not that old, we've done like 15 episodes. One entrepreneur came to our platform, and because of that and the networks we have, he was able to raise funding for their business. They're into fintech. So they've been able to raise funding for that. And then also he got other companies reaching out to, because they are doing B2B, business to business products. They're able to get clients through just sharing their story. We have another one that are entering into a partnership with a foundation. So there are, I think, by and large, I think what I was saying is, storytelling has value. As they say, people forget facts, but they remember stories. So it's important for you as an entrepreneur to package yourself, share your story in whatever form. You don't have to do video. It could be audio. It could be written. It could be long form, short form, blogs. it could be customer testimonials, it could be anything that helps you connect with your audience and build a community from there. Because at that point, your community is one that will stick with you when the business cycle goes down, right? So so that's what we do for founders, for entrepreneurs and leaders. We have one who came and launched their book and is doing well. So there are lots of learnings we've seen. I think what we also want to cover going forward is there are a lot of opportunities that are not seen, right? For example, you know, I don't know if a lot of your users know, there's now emerging technologies like green hydrogen, right? There's we've already mentioned e-mobility. I think when we spoke to you on my channel, we mentioned about carbon, right? So there are lots of opportunities that are emerging, but what happens is most people only know when they have scaled, like Uber, right? And by that time you have missed the boat, you've missed the opportunity, right? So we want to probably explain them in a very layman's term, very simple formats, so that people can, you know, do their own research and, you know, investigate if something is something they have passion in, and more people, more local founders can come in quite early and compete with the other global players that are coming. Because right now we have to think of, you know, don't think of Kenya as your market. Think of the world as your market, right? Because someone in China is already building a product for Kenya. Someone in Australia, wherever, they're already thinking of coming. So if you are thinking of just you'll be safe, there's a lot of disruption that will come in. So that's what we try to support entrepreneurs. And in my past life, I've worked, you know, prior to this, I've worked with so many to fundraise. There's one actually beautiful story. We helped a company, you know, raise funding to electrify their whole village. He's an engineer, and they're able to build a mini grid plant to electrify their own, you know, village. Something that he would not have done with his own resources. So I think there's opportunity to, I would say, not only make profit but also have an impact, you know, in your community, in your small group, or wherever you are. So that's what we do.
Thank you very much. And I think Startup Evangelist, to me, the way you have described it, represents the power of storytelling.
Yes.
And I would say mentorship as well as coaching and, you know, sharing experiences.
Yes.
But I just want to seek your thought as we close the interview.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in our channel, Explore TV, we discuss so much about taxi driving. I have interviewed a lot of taxi drivers. They have revealed their earnings to me so that people can see and then make decisions about whether it's a profitable business or not. But a lot of taxi drivers have come onto my platform to comment, and actually a lot of them accused me, saying that I am the one who has brought the industry down because I have made the Uber and the government and everybody to know about
what they are making.
And then they think that even I have made the parliament to enact some regulations to tax them because they are making a lot of money. But the stories that were there before our channel was that taxi drivers are suffering, they are struggling, they have no income, and they are like working hard to mouth. So what do you take of that? Because our stories have inspired a lot of young people to come and join and share the cake. But others feel like we should not reveal the performance of businesses to the world because you will invite competitors. And I feel like, I don't know what is your perception to that, because your idea of sharing success stories might also be seen as if you are now inviting competitors to come and, you know, share with those who are already dominating the space. So maybe your quick thought on that.
Yeah, so what I would say, of course, storytelling has to be coupled with strategy, right? You have to think of when do you want to share this story. You know, I don't think you should share your story when you've not filed your taxes, right? So you're exposing yourself. But I think, of course, be authentic to yourself, to your business, to your clients. That's one. I would start from there. The other feedback I would say, with anything, like in anything you do, whether you whether you share your story or not, there's a pros and cons. But I would say, obviously, if you do it well, the net benefit will be more than what you lose, right? It's like, for example, what you've done in terms of profiling the Uber driver, that stigma that was there, for example, either from people as, this is, something to do as a, when you've lost all hope or etc, you've given it dignity, right? And that means, there's a banker who is seeing that channel, right? So, these things have a way of impacting even business decisions, because ultimately, whenever you go somewhere, you're actually talking to a human being. When you walk to, a bank, you're talking to a person, right? So if they have a misconstrued or a perception that's wrong about your industry or your career, what are they going to do about your credit score, about your what you're trying to seek from them? They'll probably not prioritize it, right? So I think from the word go, I would say, that is one perspective. Have a strategy, be authentic to yourself, and also have, know when to tell your story and what to say. But most importantly, understand that your story is helping to shape the perception of other parties you want to work with. So, for example, if taxi drivers want to partner with corporates, they have to see that professional side, right? They have to see, there's for the vast majority of taxi drivers I talk to, they're very articulate, very smart, very educated, right? So these are people who are exposed, right? So they could possibly, that group you're saying, there are 1,000 drivers, they could probably provide the service for the Kenya Rally Championship, right? As their tour, partner, right? They could provide services to a hotel or to a very well-known brand, but they have to see that professionalism, and what you're doing is important because it is helping to demystify, who this taxi operator or this driver is. And maybe lastly, I would say is just generally from, I know probably in some instances, this idea of storytelling seems like very countercultural. We are Africans. We don't, we want to look humble. Not.
We
not
don't
too
share
proud.
what we
Yes.
earn.
We don't share what we earn. But as I said, the world is now a global village. Eventually, someone will find out whether you say it or not. There's data. There's a way I could figure out. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. So at some point, someone will figure out. But you'd rather tell your story your own way before someone else shapes your narrative, right? You don't want BBC or you don't want a foreign media to show the African kid with no shirt and a fly on their nose, right? They're looking hungry and saying Africa is starving, or Africa is a continent of war or disease, right? That's what you're trying to demystify and reshape, because that means if someone, imagine an investor or an entrepreneur who is abroad, and these are the stories they hear, right? So when they come to Kenya, you know what they will realize? That when they come and that's what they've been shaped, they'll probably be okay paying you a very low salary, right? Because they think that's what you deserve. That's the value that has been presented to them. So what we are trying to do is not only help entrepreneurs, but also even employees or people will be in your supply chain, or people will be your partners, to understand the value you as a business brings on the table. Yeah.
And I think my take home from all that, actually I had not seen it from the perspective you have brought.
Yeah.
Probably taxi drivers already in the ecosystem might feel threatened by the competition and overcrowding of more vehicles coming and more drivers coming.
Yeah.
But the reality is that banks are watching, microfinances are watching, and they are getting a more positive perception of the business.
The industry.
Yes, and maybe the credit score is going down.
Yes.
And actually last week I was discussing with Spyro, which is an electric bike company in Kenya.
Yeah.
And they were telling us that now a commercial bank has accepted to finance two-wheelers for public service.
Yeah.
And that is, one opportunity of its kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Historically, it has only been these microfinances who only work with, higher tier earners, but not the low-income earners.
Yes.
And I believe if these guys can tell the true story,
Yes.
probably KCB guys have watched some of my videos,
Yes.
and it has contributed to them building the confidence
Yes,
into the industry.
exactly.
But again, something to lose, competition will increase.
Yes.
But again, now with the financing, the market will scale up.
And remember the story, the example, the restaurant example, right? So, you know, the restaurant that is also providing ambience on top of food will have clients who come for meetings and come also for food, right? Maybe they have extra space, they can provide parking, right? So that means if competition increases as a business owner, you have to ask yourself what other defensibilities or other value points or value addition can I provide to my business or to my product to make it more competitive and survive the competition. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think, Daniel, if we continue this conversation, we will be here the whole day.
Yeah.
But maybe you are parting shot as we plan for the next one, because I believe we should have more of these educative sessions,
Yeah.
more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you are parting shots.
Yeah, I am very passionate. I think the future is in is in Africa. You know, we are over 1 billion people. Our population is growing. We have young people who are educated, energetic. So let's take advantage of what we have. Let's embrace technology. That will be our, you know, competitive edge. And let's be also, you know, people can share our stories uniquely in our own way. You don't have to do it in English, by the way. You can even do it in your, you know, in the best way you're comfortable and what reveals your authentic self. So that's my encouragement to entrepreneurs. Let's continue being innovative, and I think the sky is maybe the limit or maybe the starting point. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Asante.
Thank you.
Asante.
Bye, guys.